It's real important to keep up to date with the evolving nature of something that a lot of us really put our hearts into, serving our patients, serving our community.
I want to meet my colleagues. I want to learn from workshops. I want to meet new people and having a nice experience in San Francisco.
It's not just psychiatry, it's actually attended by people from nursing backgrounds or from social work or psychology background who might be here. And so there's an opportunity to learn from each other.
From diversity, equity, and inclusion perspectives, from emerging treatments perspectives, and to make sure that all of us are working together to advocate for important things as part of a medical community.
This is APA TV.
Welcome to APA TV.
You're watching APA TV.
Welcome to APA. You're watching APA TV.
Mental health has never been in such stark focus as society responds to a rapidly changing world. As the premier psychiatric organisation, the APA is leading the way in tackling the mental health challenges of the moment, from climate change to social media. And now the psychiatric community is coming together to innovate, collaborate and motivate the 2023 annual meeting of the American Psychiatric Association, and you can catch it right here on APA TV. Welcome to San Francisco. I'm Stephen Horn, and it's great to be back at Moscone for 5 exciting days of learning and networking as we get to the very heart of what's happening in psychiatry today. We've got 4 packed episodes of APA TV taking you through the big topics, including nutrition, artificial intelligence, technology addiction, and so much more. In our first episode, we're going big with the theme of psychiatry and society. How is mental health affecting the world around us, and how can psychiatrists influence that environment? You're going to have to keep watching to find out. On the show today, we discuss how culture can affect the way psychedelics work and how the necessary context has so often been overlooked. We get to look at the representation of Asian Americans in social media and stand by for an in-depth interview looking at a global mental health response to the climate crisis. Plus, the APA TV film series returns. We travel across the globe to find out what's happening across all the cutting edges of psychiatry today. Don't miss it. And remember, you can watch APA TV on screens at the Moscone, in select hotels, on the APA website, via the app, and of course on the virtual platform. And you can find, share, subscribe and like on social media. Our first interview will be with the APA's own Dr. Saul Levin. But first, each day of the meeting we'll hear from Eric Williams about what to watch out for right here in the Moscone Centre. To tell us about Sunday at the meeting, it's over to you, Dr. Williams.
Hello, I'm Dr. Eric Williams, Chair of the Scientific Program Committee. Welcome to Day 2 of APA's annual meeting. There are so many terrific scientific sessions today. As a reminder, you can use the app to help you find something you would like to attend. Don't miss this year's U.S. National Institute on Alcohol Abuse and Alcoholism research track with sessions that run throughout the meeting. It kicks off this morning with Overcoming Disparities in Alcohol Treatment Among Black, Indigenous, and People of Color, or BIPOC, women at 8 a.m. When you're hungry or looking for a break, drop by the exhibit hall, which hosts coffee and conversations, therapeutic updates, and much, much more. Tonight, make time for Mind Games, our national competition in which teams of residents test their knowledge on patient care, medical knowledge, and psychiatric history. This year, SUNY Downstate Health Sciences University, Nova Southeastern University Orlando, and UT Houston will compete for bragging rights. Come on down to the Hall A foyer at 5:30 to cheer them on. Have a great day.
And now it's time for our first interview. Always such a pleasure to catch up with APA CEO, Dr. Saul Levin. Thanks very much indeed for taking the time out for us.
It's my pleasure. Thank you again. It's great to be back, and it's great to have you back doing APA TV and Web's Edge.
Thank you. So, but back in San Francisco, it's great and exciting, isn't it, to have the whole team back together again?
Yes, Joe, and the numbers are showing it. We started last year in New Orleans with a smaller meeting. and began to see more people turned up there than we thought would. And it's happening again here. That people are ready to come back to an in-person meeting to meet with their colleagues, break bread with their colleagues, but also get state-of-the-art education, of cutting-edge stuff of those to psychiatry for them to take back to their practices.
On my way in this morning, passing the banners and the APA registration, I couldn't help but notice the theme of the conference: Innovate, Collaborate, and Motivate. Great words. Why did you pick those?
I think it is because it shows the positive of where we're going. We are innovative now in psychiatry. It's not like 4 or 5 decades ago, and I think the way we see it now is, how can we get the members excited to the future of psychiatry and what we're doing? And changes of a healthcare system is part of that. And I think that's what Dr. Brendel was thinking about when she chose the title.
Another thing that you're doing is the Mental Health Care Works campaign.
Yes.
Talk us through that.
So, it's come slowly to me and to the foundation that we realize that in some ways, mental health is still stigmatized, even though coming out of COVID, where everyone, and I mean everyone, at one point had some form of mental health issue, be it depression, anxiety, PTSD, and we've come out of that. And we hope that people don't forget that mental health is just like any other illness. You can prevent it, you can do early intervention, you can treat it, and you can recover from it. So I think part of what we're looking at now doing here is, how do we begin to normalize mental health? So for instance, we will no longer use the word stigma. We're the last of the illnesses that still refer to themselves as we stigmatize by doing it. We have enough medications and enough treatments today and enough research coming that's going to revolutionize psychiatry. So it's going to be a very positive campaign as to the positive of getting mental health care, getting substance abuse health care, and moving forward, just like any other illness. Diabetes, hypertension does the exact same thing. I think we're going to try and replicate that.
Final question. 2023, it feels to me that your members are playing an ever more significant role in healthcare in America today. Do you feel that?
I do. I think people realize that during COVID, that a depression or anxiety or some PTSD, they lost people that they loved, that you can get treatment for it. We have really good medications that really can help you. Psychotherapy can help you. And I think that's what we've got to think now about psychiatry. It's put the old ideas away and move into the future, and you'll do better and your patients will do better.
So thanks ever so much. Really a pleasure to speak to you. Thanks.
Wonderful to be back here.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Looking forward to a great meeting, and what a fantastic way to kick it off with Dr. Levin. Now, in the first of our features from the APA TV film series, let's head to a group committed to the community it serves. It's Atrium Health.
Atrium Health Behavioral Health Service Line was established in 2013 when we outgrew our current facility and needed to expand. We had services in a lot of locations, so we added more services, but we also added another psychiatric facility, inpatient facility, that's next year.
Training providers at all levels is key to this. We need to, from the very first day of training, weave in a behavioral health curriculum that ensures that they are able to treat patients both from a behavioral health standpoint as well as from a mental health standpoint.
We have established a social justice curriculum in our residency.
My hope for patients at Atrium Health is that we are able to hit our mission statement to improve health and elevate hope and advance healing for all.
While we've seen a major resurgence in interest in psychedelics and the role they might play in psychiatry, there's been limited attention paid to the various cultural contexts that psychedelics are used in. Just talk us through how this context can affect the way psychedelics work. I'm joined now by Dr. Sandeep Nayak. Sandeep, welcome.
Thank you for having me.
Appreciate it. Everybody around this conference and everywhere else these days seems to be talking about psychedelics. So how important are psychedelics in psychiatry today?
Psychedelics are being talked about for good reason.
there are now a number of trials that show some preliminary efficacy for a variety of psychiatric conditions. Depression most prominently, but also substance use disorders. And they're striking because they produce, in a highly psychologically supported context, relatively quick improvements in these disorders in an enduring fashion. So it's drug-assisted psychotherapy is fundamentally how I view it, and we're still kind of in the early stages, but I think there's good reason that people are talking about it.
One of the things that people don't talk about a lot, though, is context within psychedelics. How important is that context?
So this is something that we learned from the previous era of research in the 50s through 70s, where, one, there were very different research ethics. So people would be given psychedelics when they did not know they would receive a drug at all. They would be given psychedelics with minimal psychological preparation. They would be given psychedelics. The CIA was running studies. So really an entire enormous gamut of contexts. And what they found was that the drug alone is not enough to produce the therapeutic benefits. It really matters the way in which it is used. And so now we have I guess you could call it a therapeutic context that is wrapped around the entire experience. That includes hours of psychotherapy before, supportive context during, hours of psychotherapy after.
And what's all that you've learned from those contextual studies, if you like, how does that impact how you do future studies?
So there's two main avenues here. One is the clinical studies. And as far as the clinical studies go, there is a therapeutic context that, broadly speaking, seems to be working okay. And there are questions concerning how to optimize that, meaning altering the different parameters, like maybe we do more therapy, etc. However, there's also increasingly a need to understand at a public health level how psychedelics are being used more broadly, and we just need to get a much better sense of how much the context will impact the types of experiences people are having.
My last question then would be, what do you think's next then in psychedelics? So when we're sitting here next year doing the interview, what do you think we'll have? Where do you think we'll be?
We are likely to be looking at FDA approval or MDMA for PTSD. And so that, I suspect, will have happened by that point. And we will be dealing with the rollout of that and begin to see in the real world how this is functioning. So it'll really be a complete crossing of the Rubicon there.
Great. Sandeep, thanks very much. Appreciate you joining us. Thank you.
Thank you. My pleasure.
Really fascinating work there, and much more to uncover on that topic as the research unfolds. But if you want to know more now, make sure to subscribe and follow us online, and we'll have an extended version of that interview for you soon after the meeting. Now, to Bradley Hospital, offering a comprehensive mental health program within the nation's oldest pediatric psychiatric service.
There's significant evidence out there that there's a mental health crisis throughout the entire country, and it has particularly impacted children, adolescents, and their families. The mission of Bradley Hospital is firmly anchored in the belief of providing excellent care to all those who need it, regardless of ability to pay, diagnosis they present with, while training the next generation of providers throughout the country and doing robust research to improve the type of care that eventually is provided to all. One of the things at Bradley Hospital we strive to accomplish is to move care as close to the child and family in their home as possible, to get it away from the hospital setting, away from the emergency room setting, even away from the physician's office setting. I think that that's what's going to be important in psychiatry in the future, in child psychiatry, and I hope that that's something that we as a country can strive to do more thoroughly and more effectively moving into the future.
Though medical schools and residency training programs are actively recruiting medical students from underrepresented minorities, acceptance onto these programs is just the start. To talk about the challenges minority physicians face throughout their training and the structural changes that might be needed to address these, I'm joined by Frank Clark and Dr. Dionne Hart. Welcome. Appreciate that. Thank you. let's kick off. So what is the experience of Black students in medical school today?
That's a very good question. I feel that we are still trying to overcome the obstacles that have been seen throughout our history as it relates to a lack of a diverse workforce. When we look at present day and we think about what are Black medical students, facing, we're still facing this uphill battle of trying to diversify our workforce. Dr. Hart and I, we make up 2% of the psychiatric workforce.
Right.
And as Black individuals, we make up 13% of the population. So there's quite the disparity there. And in order for us to improve the health outcomes of the communities that we serve, we need a diverse workforce.
What are some of the specific challenges that Black students face?
I think what Dr. Hart was saying about not having a lot of numbers of students there really comes into opportunities for residents in medicine to feel like they belong.
Right.
So if you always in the world where you're a minority, you have this sense that you're other, that you don't belong. And, I think as a community, we do a really good job about teaching kids that education is an opportunity to move past where your parents were.
Right.
But we haven't done a good job of making people feel welcome in medicine. So we've been at the same number since like the 1960s as far as the number of minorities in general, only 9% in medicine. But at the same time, the number of Black men has been going down. And a lot of that is because people feel other and they don't get the support. So right now, Blacks are about 5% of residents, but 20% of those who are expelled. So there's not the same amount of support and there's not a lot of sponsorship and mentorship within medicine so that we can at some point reach 13%.
What do you think the longer term impact is going to be?
Well, when we look at the data and you look at longevity, I as a Black male have the shortest lifespan. Black women have a shorter lifespan than white women. So when we're looking at long term, we are looking at premature mortality, premature death, if we don't improve the health outcomes of the Black community. Another example to illustrate that is the maternal mortality that we see among Black women, right? 3 times.
And I think it really goes back to the point where zip code is a bigger factor than genetics in your health outcomes. And if we just think about mental health, Dr. Hart mentioned just 2%. So if you think about zip codes, how many of those 2% are within an area where Black communities specifically can walk to a provider where they have access? So access is very important, but then not getting the right diagnosis. So many people are underdiagnosed with mood disorders, trauma disorders, but they're overdiagnosed with thought disorders. So they're not receiving the right diagnosis, which means you're not getting the right treatment. You're more likely to get your treatment in an emergency room involuntarily. You're more likely to get your treatment in a correctional facility, not be referred for psychotherapy, to get substance use treatment. I mean, there's just so many factors that we know of that play into the role of Blacks having lesser opportunities to not only have wellness and the optimal health, but like you said, premature death.
Strikes me, though, incredible to me that we're having this conversation in 2023. Right? There's such inequality and inequity, and we're still having this conversation. Seems almost, so what do we do about it? So that's, I suppose, the big question here is what's to be done.
There's a new, it makes me uncomfortable to talk about it, but it's like co-conspirator, where people are like, move beyond just being an ally and co-conspirator. Because conspirator sounds negative, like you're doing something wrong. But it is an idea of that I don't just say that I'm supportive, but I do something. Even when you're not around, even when there's like anonymity, that you do something. So the idea that we need to inspire other people who are not facing the same barriers to do something means a lot. And at this meeting, for the first time, there's a resident fellow and medical student track. So there's opportunities to discuss, like in the structural racism session that we're going to have. So there's more opportunities to talk about what are those barriers, and to do it in a safe space where you don't feel like if I speak up, my program's going to find out and there's going to be some backlash. So I think these opportunities to talk about it, to feel safe and having those discussions and having real solutions, and not just like see on paper where people check boxes and they kind of pat themselves on the back and then nothing changed. I think we're really moving past the talk and walking.
Well, thank you both very much indeed for joining us today. Really appreciate it. It's been great to talk to you, so thank you.
Appreciate it.
Lots to learn from Dr. Clark and Dr. Hart there, and hopefully room to improve the experience of psychiatrists and potential psychiatrists from all backgrounds. Let's take a look now at the Southwest Brain Bank, based in El Paso, Texas. They're dedicated to advancing the understanding of mental health illness and reducing health disparities through brain collection, collaboration, and training.
Brain Bank has been essential in terms of providing tissue for people who are interested in postmortem research. And postmortem research had been the mainstay for psychiatric research prior to the 1900s. But scientists have really been relying on non-invasive imaging studies in animal models to understand the pathology and pathophysiology of mental illness.
So SWBB stands for the Southwest Brain Bank, and the main mission and the goal for the SWBB is brain collection, research on mental health disorders, and also collaboration, training for medical students, residents, fellows, and undergrad students here.
With the rapid change in the technology, really pushing science, it's going to be even more essential to be able to supply people with tissue from where the illness resides. So I think it's going to be a bright future for the Southwest Brain Bank.
We've come a long way from the early days of representation of South Asian Americans in the media, but unpacking the impact media and its representation of cultures and communities can have on the individual is still a big topic. Tell us more. We caught up with Dr. Siba Anand.
Media has a really powerful influence because it can really shape the way in which we see ourselves and how others see us. So if we don't see ourselves represented on screen, it can indicate a sense of lack of value or worthiness. And then we do see ourselves represented on screen, it can really shape the way that we see ourselves and how others may react and behave and relate to us. So I think the power of media is really strong in terms of influencing how we see ourselves in the world around us, and then how others see us, which can then shape the way in which we behave with one another and how we relate to one another. At first, there was a complete lack of representation, so invisibility. And then when we started to have some more representation of South Asians on the screen, oftentimes it wasn't even by South Asians. And when there was representation of South Asians, it was very much stereotyped or caricatures, often trading on perpetual foreigner or model minority stereotypes, which can be harmful. Things started to evolve where we had more accurate and nuanced representation, but generally that was sidelined characters or sidekicks, so there wasn't kind of a whole sense of humanity. Fortunately, things are changing, and so now we're seeing kind of more complex, multi-layered, multi-dimensional representation, and even some leading roles. I think this is a really important topic that really, of course, does not have very much investment. So one of the things that we're trying to do is investigate what are the ways in which media representation of Asian Americans can influence their behavior, their attitudes about themselves, their sense of belongingness, and also how are they kind of experiencing the media, the portrayals and the depictions of kind of their communities, and then how are others responding to those portrayals and depictions? Does it influence the ways in which the people who are not part of your community see your community or see others who are like you, or even in other communities? Because what we do know is that when there's stereotypical or unidimensional representation of groups, oftentimes it leads to dehumanization, and when that people are not seen as full figures, full people, it can beget violence, community violence, discrimination, racial prejudice. And so one of the concerns that we have is if we continue to perpetuate these stereotypes, to what degree does that kind of contribute to exacerbating discrimination and potentially bullying, violence, and other kind of negative intergroup relationships. So other ways to get involved or learn more is that we'll be speaking about Asian American representation, 2 separate sessions, one focused on South Asian American representation and the impact on mental health at a session here at the APA, and we'll also be speaking about anti-Asian sentiment in the age of COVID-19, avenues for advocacy, at a separate session with Russell Zhang, who was one of the founders of Stop Appy Hate, along with another APA caucus member, Will Wong. And then stay tuned for the results of the research findings related to the impact of Asian American representation in mental health.
Let's head now to a group with a groundbreaking approach to suicide prevention. It's the Henry Ford Health System.
Zero suicide is a healthcare model that's designed to be a care pathway spread across healthcare systems to prevent suicide. Henry Ford is the birthplace of zero suicide. Developed in 2001, and implementation actually led to a reduction in suicide within our patient population in behavioral health by almost 80%.
Suicide is preventable. It's preventable because we can assess for risk. We look at risks. We stratify them into acute, high, moderate, and low. The key is, how do we modify those risks?
The program then has become an international phenomenon. Zero suicide has now been implemented in over 20 countries around the world.
The idea of zero was thought to be outlandish. If the answer is not zero as a goal, what is it?
We have an opportunity to implement these care pathways so that we can actually save people's lives.
Coming up, we've got a fascinating discussion into how to mount a global response to the mental health challenges of climate change. But first, to an effort built out of crisis. The McMaster's University Healthcare Salute was designed to support healthcare workers during the COVID-19 pandemic. Let's take a closer look.
Healthcare Salute really arises from research that we began early on in the pandemic, when we have now surveyed over 1,250 Canadian healthcare workers about their mental health and well-being. We've also conducted in-depth interviews of over 120 healthcare workers. And from that, we asked, what do you need?
We had 2 key goals for developing these materials. One was to build mental health literacy in healthcare providers, and the other one was to provide guidance and support to healthcare organizations and mental health clinicians who were supporting healthcare providers. So we have information sheets, fact sheets, just giving information on the topic. What is moral injury? And also giving them tools to build their own coping and resiliency. All the deliverables are compact with very simple, practical suggestions and ideas to help them manage their well-being a little bit better.
As the climate crisis already begins to create challenges for people around the world, the threat of the major changes climate change will likely bring in the coming decades is already affecting people's mental health. To discuss COP Square, the United Nations initiative to tackle this, I'm joined by Dr. Beth Haas and Dr. Gary Belkin. Both welcome, and thank you very much indeed for joining us today.
Thank you. It's a pleasure.
So Beth, maybe I could turn to you first. The first question, it's a big question really, isn't it? Which is, how is climate change affecting people's mental health?
Right. I mean, I think it's in many, many ways, and that's why it's a big question, right? I mean, there are all of these sort of direct biological effects on the brain, the things that come with heat and air pollution and raising rates of violence, raising rates of suicide. People with mental illness are particularly vulnerable. And to climate change, they're one of the disadvantaged groups. And just because of their mental illness, they die more easily in the heat, you know. But I think that for what we're talking about today, what we're really talking about is that it's a global problem where you see these cumulative traumatic impacts, right? And there's sort of like chronic low-grade trauma as well as bigger traumas. And how do we respond to that? Because we know that we don't actually have enough mental health providers to do it, right? And so that's what this panel and this question is really about.
So COP Squared, what's COP Squared?
The COP Squared is a network of about 350 organizations and growing that's trying to grasp the size of the answer to your question and the bigness of your question, which is not only what Beth mentioned, just more need, more distress, more demand, but the social effects of that. It erodes the ability of people to act collectively and to solve problems. And we really need that civic muscle now more than ever. And that hasn't tended to be the business of mental health providers and systems, but these 350 organizations plus are saying, no, it has to be, and how do we do that?
How did it come about?
So I mostly worked at kind of a population level around mental health. I was the mental health commissioner for New York City for a while, really thinking about how do these forms of distress affect whole communities? And so when I left that work to focus on climate change, and people were starting to talk about these outsized effects on populations, but also the psychological strengths our communities need, particularly that are most climate adversity facing communities. How do we put that to work? How do we put that to ground? So a lot of the principles for public mental health are really applicable there. And we want to bring the whole psychiatric community to see its power to help its communities face these challenges.
Let me ask you a question which is, how do you go about giving people that reassurance when the answers to the bigger questions involved aren't always so clear?
Well, I know Beth deals with this a lot, and I would just say my short answer would be it's not so much reassurance as tools for people to find their own way to live with this reality and try to seize opportunities to work on.
And so what's the overall mission, vision of COP Squared? What are you hoping to achieve?
So we want to use the diversity of this network to really show new ways that mental health works within other aspects of community life, how to implement through the work of climate change, through other social spaces and places. We know a lot of how to do that, but we haven't really implemented that way. And one of our first big opportunities is to work with something called the United Nations Race to Resilience, which is about how communities can grow their own power to do climate adaptation. And we said, hey, you also need psychological resilience and mental resilience as part of that path. It's not just physical infrastructure and strengthen it. And so we need to bring mental health systems, but all these other mobilized civic energy around climate to do the work at psychological resilience goal as well.
I mean, what I would say is it's really about psychiatrists supporting the lay community. It's maybe about us having a public health role that we haven't had, but it's about us empowering them with the knowledge that they need to do what they already do well in a local way. So,
how can people find out more at this conference at the town hall?
Well, we have a COP2 town hall meeting tomorrow, and we're really, really hoping that people are going to come out, because what we need is all the expertise of psychiatrists who work in the community. Think about how do we do this? How do we make ourselves available on a national level in this North American hub in a networking way that remains creative and vital? And we really need you to help us figure it out. So tomorrow, Room 151, Moscone South, please come. It would be really great to see you all.
Well, thank you both so much indeed for joining us today, and I hope the town hall tomorrow is a great success, and I'm sure it will be. So thank you.
Ethan, thank you.
A big topic and a big challenge, but one I'm sure psychiatrists are up for. Remember, subscribe and follow us to check out an extended version of that interview to find out so much more. Now, as it's our first day here at the Moscone, and we know you've traveled far and wide to be here, let's catch up with some of this year's APA annual meeting attendees.
It's a really important meeting to be at in order to network with the people that are really doing what's cutting edge and learn more about what's going on, and to also make connections with other departments in order to do collaborative studies and ensure that we have the best care for our patients.
APA is important because it's an avenue for me to catch up with some of my friends that we went to medical school together, and then it's also a place where you can also catch up on new information. And I love attending the expo. Yeah, it's fun.
I am looking forward to some newer stuff. So there is quite a bit of interest in psychedelics assisted psychotherapy. So there is that's something which is happening around the world. It's gained attention of the public, and I'm looking forward to hearing from some of the experts around what they are doing here.
I have a poster presentation. I just came here to share my knowledge with other people and learn from their posters and just new trends that's in psychiatry. I hear that a lot of pharmaceutical companies here learn about new drugs, new innovations, and just to network.
I've been running into people I haven't seen in more than 10 years, and it's great to catch up and see how our shared passions continue to bring us to the same place. Understand what are the issues that we're finding in common no matter where we're practicing from, and trying to figure out how to address these things together and in unique ways wherever we find ourselves throughout the world.
We'll catch up with more of you later on in the meeting. Make sure to say hello. That finishes up our first show here in the Golden Gate City. But with 3 more to go, there's plenty to look forward to. Tomorrow's theme is mind and body. We talk gut microbiota and improving mental health through nutrition. And remember, you can watch APA TV on screens at the Moscone, in select hotels, on the APA website, via the app, and of course on the virtual platform. And you can find, share, subscribe and like on social media. Thanks for watching, but remember, as they always say, the best is yet to come. We'll see you tomorrow here on APA TV.